My name's Tim. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. Should we start with the Serenity Prayer? Okay. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change things I can, wisdom to know the difference. I hesitated. I almost accidentally did a Hail Mary then. That's not the right... you don't do that in meetings. But that was what I was praying before I came in. So, who am I? The most important thing is that I'm an addict. Substances varied, behaviours varied. I've been clean for 32 years. I got clean in 1993 in July. I first got clean in 1990, but that didn't take. You know the way seedlings and cuttings don't take. I didn't take. It took another 3 more years to get the hang of the not drinking and not using part of this. Now, the topic of this is how not to be upset. And I'm going to start with I haven't planned this, so whatever comes out is whatever comes out, so be it. But I'm going to start with a friend of mine. I hope he won't mind me saying this. I mean, it's just between you and me and whoever listens to this tape here. But some people in AA are very light and airy, and other people are very, as my friend Chris would put it, heavy pudding, very serious. And so I've been in 32 odd years, he's been in donkey's years. And I think he's lightened up a bit now, but for a long time, if ever he got upset about something, he'd put on this long, solemn, religious face and say, I'm going to have to do some serious inventory about this. And then he'd come back a couple of days later saying, I've written 7 major pieces of inventory on that situation. And now I'm going to take it into prayer and meditation. And it sounds so grand. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the person who every time they get upset have to write a serious piece of inventory. There's a time and a place. Like the first 2 or 3 times through the steps, people go through the steps once. I thought I went through the steps once at the beginning, and I thought I'm good to go now. Now I've got rid of drink and drugs and all the other things. Now I've got rid of that. I can get on with the business of living my life the way I want to live my life, and all the things that I couldn't get and have because I was screwed in the head and out of commission, I can go and get those now. And I thought I was done. I was not done. The first run through the steps enables me to do the second and third runs, and that's where you really get to the business. And that goes on forever. Now, it's not that you have to rehash the past again and again and again, but sometimes you put things in the washing machine and it comes out and it needs to go in again, and it needs to go in. And after 3 or 4 washes, it's gone. But you want to get to a stage. I had to, when I was about 13, 14 years clean, I had to get to a stage where I'm sick of feeling like I'm emotionally crippled by the past, that I'm oversensitive, touchy, like fine for weeks and then suddenly flying into a rage or going into a state of mind that I then can't get myself out of, that I'm then stuck in for days or weeks. That had to go. My other half is not in recovery, doesn't need to be in recovery, and is embarrassingly well. And he's in a very prominent position in what he does. I'm nothing. He's in a prominent position. And so a lot of people get very angry with him, with lists of reasons why they're angry. And very public meetings where members of the public can come along and he has to justify what is going on in a political area. And I said to him, how do you handle people resenting you? And he said, first of all, I'm embarrassed for them because it's so childish. Secondly, they need to get over it because it gets in the way. And I've been someone who, in recovery, will brandish these huge resentment lists, thinking, I've got 400 resentments which I've written about. And I would be proud of it somehow, as if this somehow showed some sort of spiritual advancement, that I was able to identify so many things I was upset with. I should have been a little more embarrassed about this. Still having these crippling, childish, emotional handicaps. And it's interesting, in the big book, it says on page 68, once we begin to outgrow fear. In other words, fear as well is a sign of emotional immaturity in my book. And there are 3 types of upset that it covers in the big book. There's resentment, there is fear, and there is guilt. Now, it's a weird old thing. The step 4 in the big book is 8 pages long. That's it. Half of that is on resentment. And you think, if you get a good list of character defects, so if you get a list of, the sacraments of penance or something like that, there'll be like 200 or 300 individual character defects that a human being can have. Resentment is just one of them. So why has it got 4 pages on resentment to start with? Why not 4 pages on selfishness? Why not 4 pages on fear? Why not 4 pages why resentment? And what resentment is, someone was talking the other day about a tug of war between me and God, and I turn my will over to God and then I take it back, and it's a tug of war and it goes back and forth. That's not a bad image. It resonates psychologically with how it feels. It feels like you're fighting against God, you're fighting against the right thing. You know what the right thing is to do, but you want to do the wrong thing. So I understand that. But there's another person in the room who is invisible. There's me, there's God, and there's my ego. Now, whenever I'm angry, whenever I'm upset, whenever I'm frightened, whenever I'm any of those things, those aren't my feelings. People say you need to get in touch with your feelings. And they're right. But what I took that to mean was I need to get in touch with my anger, I need to get in touch with my fear, I need to get in touch with my guilt. The fact is, those feelings are they're like fire alarms. There's just this constant horrible noise. That's not feeling. You saw that dancing yesterday and listened to that music. Everything you felt during that. That's feeling, where it's constantly changing and you couldn't put words to it, but you know you're feeling something. That's real feeling. Resentment isn't feeling. It is a block to feeling. Fear isn't a feeling. It is a block to feeling. It's like this awful wall which shuts me off from any kind of real experience of other people or me or God or life or nature or music or dance or anything. It's this awful prison where it's the same note. Have you noticed when you're resentful, it's the same feeling. Whoever it is, whatever they've done, it feels the same. That's the tip-off. It's not a real feeling. It's a block to feeling. And those states of resentment and fear and guilt and shame are from the ego. The ego has been feeding me narratives. I've been believing the narratives, making them my own. The ego covers its tracks. It does not want me to know that it is the one that is feeding me the resentment. And I think I'm resentful. I'm not resentful. The ego has been whispering all the things that you've done wrong and how wicked and stupid and inconsiderate and selfish you are, and then conceals the fact that it's whispered those to me because it sounds like it's coming in my voice. So it's not that I'm in a tug of war against God. It's that the little dial on my radio is sometimes turned to God and it's sometimes turned to the ego. And I don't know if you've noticed, I went to bed feeling pretty great last night, and I woke up in a slightly odd mood. Sometimes I wake up and it's like I'm on a completely different planet. I've been teleported to some hellish hellish universe, and I don't know even how to find my way back. I was like fine last night, and now there's suddenly a massive problem with my life, apparently. And I can't even pin down what it is. I just know that it's wrong. You can turn the dial to God all you like. I had a microwave oven which was on the blink for a while, and it had 2 dials on it. One of the dials was the time, and the other dial was the temperature. So it would either do full power or that kind of slow defrost thing, which actually doesn't do anything at all. And you had to hold the top dial, the temperature dial, towards like the full power, because if you didn't and turned your back, it would gradually click to the left, all the way over to the defrost setting. You'd leave something there for 5 minutes, nothing would have happened to it. And it's like that with the dial where I'm choosing between the ego and God. I can switch it to God, but it's always turning itself back. And then I have to keep turning it back to God. I haven't taken my will back. That makes it sound as like I'm doing something as an act of the will. I'm not. The ego's voice gets louder and louder, and God's voice gets quieter and quieter, and before I know it, all I'm listening to is the voice of resentment and fear and guilt and shame and irritation and envy and jealousy and all of those things. Occasionally I get the devil in me, but generally it just seems to happen. I don't will it, it just seems to happen. That's why I've never liked that, taking your will back, because it's as though you're in charge, and I'm either a slave to the ego or I'm a servant of God. I get to pick between those two. I'm not in charge in either. I'm not in charge in either case. And when I was using, I had no choice but to use. That was the end of it. When the thought came, I remember the last time my sobriety date, the 24th of July, 1993, I was in a meeting that day, and I was having a great time. And I left the meeting walking up the road, and the thought occurred to me, and that's the phrase. I didn't go and make the thought like you make an omelette. The thought occurred to me. It was in charge. It did the occurring. The thought occurred to me that a drink would be a good idea, and I went and did it. I had no choice in the matter. There was no other option on the table. The only option was to go and drink. And now I'm sober and clean. The only option is to stay sober and clean. In fit spiritual condition, I could no more... I don't know if anyone's seen that M. Night Shyamalan film, The Happening, where nature gets its own back on humanity and somehow induces people en masse to commit suicide in these rather sort of gruesome ways over 2 hours. And now I haven't seen it, but I saw some clips and then I got weirdly mesmerised by it, and I thought, I can't watch this film, it'll do my head in. But you see these people, like, apparently completely normal, like on scaffolding or something, and these people would just step off the scaffolding. And that's what my drinking and using was like. It was stepping off the scaffolding with a 100-foot drop below. And I could no more do that today than I could bash a hole in this window and jump out of here. I don't have any more choice today about staying sober than I did about getting drunk and high when I was doing that. So this illusion of choice, this illusion of power, there isn't one. There is one thing, there's only one thing I can do. And this will free up the whole day when you realise there's only one thing you can do. The one thing I can do is turn back to God. That is it. Get the dial, turn it back to God, boom. When I'm turned to God, I might make mistakes, but they're retrievable. But I won't get into terrible trouble. If I'm turned to the ego, I can be getting everything right on paper, but it's not going to work. But back to this question of upset. Over the years, one gets a lot of calls from people in recovery where they say, my friend Ivana, I always use her as the example, and she knows I do this and it's fine, I got her permission. She'd phone up and I'd say, how are you? She'd say, I'm not okay. I'd say, okay, what's going on? She'd, I'm full of resentment. And the image is like you're a pot and someone has come along and poured the resentment in you, and now you're full of resentment. And I'd say to her, and I would say it myself, people would say, what are you doing about the resentment? Well, I've written about it. Now, if there's a really bad smell in the kitchen and someone says to you, what have you done about it? I've made a list of all the things in the kitchen which smell. Now, that might help you clean the kitchen more systematically than you might otherwise have done. But it won't clean the surfaces, it won't clean the oven, it won't open the window, and it won't take the trash out. Writing is... someone mentioned it last night, that he'd done a written step 4 and a written step 8, and now people are writing on everything. I'm going to share an opinion. Can I... Someone from England coming and sharing an opinion in Ireland. There's a bit of bad precedent for that, but I'm going to risk it. I can do the steps wrong by not doing what it says, and I can get them wrong by doing more than what it says. There is such a thing as over-egging the pudding. And a little bit of writing is necessary. If you don't write down the step 4, you'll forget what to say in step 5. If you don't write out the step 8, you'll forget who to make amends to. But the trouble is, as soon as I write something, there's a side effect. The side effect, it makes it more real to me. It turns it from some vague thing in my head to this monstrous, solid thing in front of me, and you've almost got more of a problem getting rid of it then. And I can't tell you how often I've had the conversation. So you're full of resentment, I understand, and you've written about it. But what else? And they say, I don't know. Isn't that what it says to do in the book? And of course it does, but that's a preliminary to doing something else. And there are a couple of things with resentment. The first one is that, imagine you're in a rowing boat and you've got holes in the bottom of the rowing boat which are gradually, water is seeping in. You've actually got 2 jobs, not 1. The first job is to scoop all the water that's collected in the rowing boat out of the rowing boat before it sinks. And I'll come back to the sinking bit in a minute. But the second thing you've got to do is stop up the holes so that the water stops seeping in. And I think people can get pretty good at scooping the water out, getting rid of the resentment, but not stopping it from coming back. It's the stopping it from coming back. That is the key. And what will happen if one doesn't sort it out? Have you ever thought, well, I need to go to a different fellowship because I've done everything that I'm supposed to do in this fellowship, but I've got problems in the area of relationships, so I obviously need to go to SLA, and I've got problems in this area and that area. Like there's a separate God for relationships. And there's a separate God. And as though, the steps... I mean, the reason Al-Anon exists, one of the reasons it exists is to give non-alcoholics the access to the 12 steps in a structured way in a fellowship environment, so to put them on the same level playing field, because you can't have them in AA. I mean, for more reasons than one, but let's not go into those. And the reason there are 400 fellowships is to give people with all sorts of problems access to the 12 steps. It's not that the 12 steps of AA or CA won't work on everything. Oh, they'll work on everything if you apply them to everything. But what I did in the first few years, I thought, well, AA isn't working, so I tried codependency therapy and CBT and all sorts of other things and books on this and books on that and the trauma of this and the trauma of that. I came into recovery with lots of Ds, this disorder and that disorder. And I was looking everywhere, and the answer was sitting in the book the whole time. And I was talking to someone yesterday about this question of, well, why do you have to go through the steps again? Or the question of how do you go through the steps again? Often it boils down to reading the same line you've read 100 times before, but trying to see what it really means this time. I'm sure you've heard people do talks, and if people do a talk like this, it's absolutely fine. When they say, alcohol and drugs were my master, and I reached a point of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralisation, and then I met a man who was armed with the facts, and then I followed the clear-cut directions, I picked up the set of spiritual tools which are laid at my feet, and then I was rocketed into a fourth dimension of experience. Now I spend much of my free time engaged in the work we're about to describe, and now I live a life where I'm happy, joyous and free. And then they sort of sit back and smile and cross their arms, and you're supposed to know who they are from this, and you don't. I mean, you know in a general sense, but there's nothing that you don't know who the person is behind. Everything they're saying is true, but you don't know who the person is. And part of it is, in AA, sometimes you have to sort of reintroduce the big book to people in AA because they're unfamiliar with the fact it contains the instructions. In CA, we almost have the opposite problem, that everyone is always reading from the book and doing the steps and this method and that method, and we've got these new worksheets from Winnipeg or Vladivostok or wherever, and I've got these special highlighter pens. Do you want some? I can get them at a good... The book becomes imprinted on your mind, and you forget you're allowed to read it and try to figure out what the hell it means. It just becomes a series of slogans like a daisy chain that you hang around your neck just to prove that you've understood the book. And of course there is some understanding there. But upset. One thing about the rowing boat, and by the way, paper and pens, if people have questions, write the questions, make a little sign to Keith, he'll bring the questions up to the front, and then I'll feed the answers to the questions back into what I'm doing. It will be seamless. So if you want to ask anything you feel you can't ask your sponsor or that's embarrassing, or just write it down neatly, and we'll see what we can do. But the point about the rowing boat, which is letting in the water, a person can stand only so much. And there have been various points, particularly in my first 10 years, where I was very close to using again. Do you ever get yourself into a situation where someone offers you drugs and you feel like, I don't know why this is happening to me? Well, no, I put myself in a situation with people who are the sort of people that take drugs and are liable to offer anyone who's there a drug. It's not by accident. My addiction has an IQ about 20 points above mine. It's been to every meeting that I've done. It did all the Course in Miracles exercises for a year that I did. It's fully up to speed. It's entirely genned up, and it's got time on its hands and it's got time on its side. And it's constantly, like world services are constantly active, so is my ego, constantly active. And if I'm persistently unhappy, I mean, as you go around meetings, you discover that being persistently unhappy for a long time doesn't necessarily condemn people to drink or use. Some people manage to carry on for years, poor things. I certainly did. But what it does, being persistently unhappy, have you ever noticed when you're unhappy, well, when I'm unhappy, all I'm thinking about is me. I'm the centre of my life. I'm the focus of my attention. And when I'm doing that, God's business is not the focus of my attention. I get the protection from God against the desire to drink because I serve God. It's an employment contract. And if I'm not doing the work because I'm consumed with myself, I'm blocking myself off from the only thing which will get in there and stop me from having the first drink or drug. Just a little thing about how that happens. There's a bit of my brain which is programmed. Maybe it was always programmed that way, or maybe I programmed it through my own behaviour with substances and behaviours. It just wants to get high. But it isn't even wanting the way you and I might want something. It's just like a computer subroutine which is programmed to send a little message to the front of my brain and said, let's use. It's not thinking, it's not feeling, it's just programmed. That's it. And that little subroutine is, I have to say, a hell of a lot quieter than it used to be, but it can't be uninstalled. It's just stuck there on the hard drive, and occasionally it fires itself up for God knows what reason. I might be happy, I might be unhappy, whatever. There's no pattern to it. It's not like you can predict the situations in which it might pop up and get reactivated and avoid those, and then you're absolutely fine. It can happen at any time. You have to be prepared for the moment that it's going to do that. Now, when it does that, it's as though, you know those cartoons where someone is holding a swinging pocket watch in front of someone's eyes and they watch it like that and they're hypnotised? That's me in the face of the desire to drink or use. It hypnotises me into thinking it's a good idea, and I'm powerless against that. The only thing which can come between me and that is God. I need to serve God. If I'm full of self, I'm not serving God, I'm at risk. So I need to get rid of upset, not just because it's nice to get rid of upset, but because my life depends on it. That's the point about the rowing boat with the water seeping in. Eventually it's going to sink, but you won't have any warning. Someone was saying a little while ago, it's like when a building collapses, the moment before it collapses, you can't tell it's about to collapse. But gradually the foundations are being undermined, or landslips, the same thing. Once the landslip starts, it's too late. But you can't tell by looking at the land before it slips that it's about to slip. A geologist might be able to analyse it, but that's a different question. And it's like that with sobriety. The moment before I would slip would be a moment in which I'm sober. So being sober does not mean I'm going to stay sober. My spiritual condition determines whether I'm going to stay sober, which is why that becomes my most important priority, is my spiritual condition. But it's nice to be rid of upset, although sometimes not. I'll tell you why. Have you ever... Now, there's a lot going on in the world, but there always has been. And occasionally I come across the news, and I saw a news item the other day, and it was of something going on in central London, and there were members of the public who were shouting at each other on opposite sides of an argument, going, you know, with the hand and the finger and the pointing, and all the world's media were recording and broadcasting these fools around the whole world. And they were arguing with each other, apparently on the basis that there isn't enough shouting in the world, and if there were a little bit more shouting, then everyone would calm down and go home or something. I don't know what the theory was, but I understand it. I used to be a revolutionary communist a very long time ago, and I would literally go on marches and man the barricades and shout pigs at the police and all of that thing, in the belief that I was bringing about the revolution which would change society and blah, blah, blah. And however angry or upset I was, I loved it. And I'll tell you why. There's a perverse pleasure when something really bad happens. Something in me says, I've got really good material now. And then I will go around retailing that material. And have you noticed when you're upset, you're right and they're wrong? So there's something sensationally enjoyable about being right and about other people being wrong. And sometimes, you know, everything's going okay in your life, so you decide to go online to find some people who are wrong there in relation to whom you can be right, just because you need to be right. If it keeps happening, it's because it's being enjoyed. So it's not an obvious question. Do you want to get over it? Well, part of me does, but part of me wants to remain the centre of attention. And a friend of mine explained, maybe the reason you still have so much anger and so much upset is because you're the hero of the show. When you're upset, you're the hero. The spotlight is on you. Even if it's a horror film, you're the star of the horror film. And the terror is, if I get rid of all the upset, who am I going to be? I'm just going to be nothing. So now once you get over that, once you've suffered enough, and that can take, 10 to 15 years. Some people are precocious. Some people are genuinely precocious and get there quicker. But not everyone. It took me, I'm slow, so it took me a while. But the beginning of the end of upset is this line. Have you ever noticed when you're upset it's because you haven't got your own way? It's not complicated. Exactly what your own way is, trying to work out what that is, that can be complicated. But the basic anatomy of this is I haven't got my own way. And there's a line here which I was a long time sober before I understood it. And it's before we get to step 3. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. And if that gets read out 10 times, you've now memorised it and you stop thinking about what it might mean. I'm self-will run riot, people will say. And you're like, well, I know what you mean. But what do you mean? What does that mean? Does that just mean you're an arsehole? What? Maybe. Any life run on self-will. What's self-will? Well, what's self? You can't answer the question, what's self-will, until you know what self is. Imagine being in heaven and you're in a kind of heavenly choir and the universe is just filled with this heavenly music, with God as the choral director and every spirit in the universe part of this magnificent sound. And a little voice pops up inside me and says, I want a solo. I don't like this. I want everyone to hear me. I don't like just being... that there's a line in the 12 and 12 which strikes fear and dread into people's hearts. Worker amongst workers. Because a bit of me says, if all I'm ever going to get to be is just a worker amongst workers, I can't be bothered with it. It's a lot. It's too much, in fact. So, no. I want to be in charge, or you can keep it. I don't want to work. What's the point in working and then just being a worker amongst workers? So there's a bit of me that wants to be special. Have you ever wanted someone else to say that you're special and you tell them that they're special so that they'll tell you you're special back? And then you tell each other you're special like all day long. And then if you tell them they're special more than they tell you you're special and they don't reply quickly enough, it means they don't think you're as special as you've told them they are. But the only reason you're telling them that is so that they tell it back to you. And you realise you're a crock of shit and you've sold them a bill of goods. And then you start to realise they're playing the same game. You're both selling each other counterfeit goods, all with this kind of, the wedding's going to be the happiest day of my life. Yes, it will be, because it's all downhill from there as you discover that the horrific reality that you have no idea how to form an actual bond with another human being. You know how to do the romance shit, and you know how to shout at each other and give each other the cold shoulder, but there's nothing in between. And the sex is good. Oh, is it? I was going somewhere with this. Specialness. And you collect up this whole roster of situations and people who haven't shown me enough love and attention and validation. And you go out into the world to seek new situations to mend your wounded self-esteem. and pay back all the other arseholes for failing to show you the proper recognition. This one is I'm going to repeat the story but get the ending to change. This is self, this idea that I'm going to separate myself from the world. I'm going to have an identity. I'm going to work out who I am, and then I'm going to forge my way in the world and make something of myself. That's self, this idea that I'm this separate creature stuck in the material world, with the material world being all there is, and I have to grab from it everything in terms of sex and money and power and prestige and comfort and thrills and appearance to build this whole structure so that everyone looks at me and says, he's made it. Look at him, against the odds. Because you've got to have that little tragic twist running. It's not enough to succeed. You've got to succeed and prove that you really did have it in you, because look at how the odds were stacked against you, and yet you made it anyway. That it's the tragic. It's no good being a hero like Superman, because he had it good the whole time. You want to be the tragic hero with the secret sorrow. Far more of an interesting character, far more of a pull. Now, that's the game plan of the ego. And it comes up with this endless list of all the things I need in the world for me to be okay. You know, when you're at school and you think, when I get my leaving certificate or whatever it is, I'll be fine, I'm good to go. But then you have to get an apprenticeship or a degree or something. Well, I've got the qualification that I'm good to go. And then you have to get a job, then you have to get a promotion. Whatever you get, the ego says, no, that's not enough. You need the next thing and the next thing. And you're married. And the ego says you need someone else. You're selling yourself short. You could do so much better than this. I know none of you have ever felt that. Now, here's the line. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. In other words, as soon as I think I have an identity and I'm someone and I have to make it in the material world, I'm going to come up with a game plan. What this is telling me is if you have a game plan for your life of what you want, it's not going to work. And you're like, no, it will work. It will work. It's perfectly reasonable. Like regular people get jobs and get married, and isn't that just normal to want things? And what the book is saying is no to the whole of Western civilization. The whole idea that me making lists of things that I want and going and getting them is wrong. I'm wrong. And when I'm upset, I'm therefore unhappy because I haven't got my own way, even though if I got my own way, I wouldn't be happy. There's a story about a man who is sitting, a tramp, who's sitting on a dock by a bay looking out over the sunrise. And this rich man walks past, walking on his way to work. And the tramp says to him, "Good morning, sir. Why don't you come and join me by the dock? Look at the sunrise." And the man says, "No, I've got to get to work." And he says, "Why?" "Well, I need to earn some money, and I'm an important man, and I run a business." And they have a conversation, and he explains that he's running the business, and one day he'll be able to sell the business, and he'll have enough money. And once he's got enough money, he can retire, and he's going to buy a boat. He said, "I'm going to buy a boat, and I'm going to put it in this marina here. And then in the morning, I'll be able to just sit here, relaxed, watch the sun come up." And the tramp says, "I already do that." All of this whole charade, this busy, the plans and designs are there so that one day I'll be able to relax and go, "Oh, it's all right now." Now, the truth is, I could just go, it's all right now. Now, the truth is that I don't need anything to be okay. And we're in a world which tells you the opposite the whole time, in a society which tells you the opposite the whole time. So the beginning of this is starting to realise that the whole basis, and that's just one line, and there are another 50. You could do a weekend-long thing on this question. But it's just one example of one line. If I could get that entirely through my thick skull, it's some of the way there. And a lot of the time, I understand that at a cellular level. But there are times when I catch myself, but I want. The little wanting monster is still alive, doing its wanting, whispering its little wantings at me, so that I will rush out there and then become upset with other people. So the short version of this is that the answer is actually that the many answers are in the book. And they don't lie in doing yet more inventory, although you might need to do more inventory. It's about reading the book and seeing what it actually says. Self. What does self mean? Will. What does will mean? Can hardly be a success. You mean, why self-will? Why can it hardly be a success? And you work it through with your own examples. I studied at one point and got some sort of qualification. And the sacrifice that went into getting that qualification, day after day, week after week, year after year, and the fear of not passing the exams, and the frustration when I had setbacks, and the uncertainty, all of the suffering that came from that. So as soon as I've got plans and I'm invested in those plans, I'm suffering already. Fear, frustration, uncertainty, setback. But then you get the thing, and it's not enough. It's now a very politically incorrect comedy series, but one from 20-odd years ago called Little Britain, where there's a character that was in a wheelchair. Well, he was being pushed around in a wheelchair, but it turned out he was perfectly able-bodied. But he'd got into a deal with someone where the person would push him around, and he'd say, I want this. And he put someone else to huge amounts of trouble to get the thing that he wanted. And when he got the thing that he wanted, it was never good enough.
I like it.
You're with me on that one. Now, the horror, the absolute horror of this is those two characters are inside me. I'm the one that has to push my ego around in its little wheelchair, doing its bidding, and whatever I give it, it's not happy. And to realise the enemy is not God, the enemy is within me. And it's not even me, it's the ego. Now, there's almost 20 minutes left. We've got time for some questions. There are some other things I can talk about as well, which expand this further. I don't know if we've got any written questions, but do we have it? Does anyone have a hand-up question? Anything at all? If not, if you want to put your hand up at any point, just put your hand up and I'll hear what your question is. And if you've got a written one, just write it out and Keith will grab it. Yes.
How do you do your step downs?
I like the question, because I like the wording of the question. My step tens. And the plural already it's in the plural, my step 10s. It sounds horrific, like this stack of things that I have to do, like one after another. Oh, I'm tired. Do you do your step 10s?
Yeah, just not written.
That sounds tiring. It sounds tiring. It sounds really tiring. Okay, so part of the daily clearing up of upset, and I can't do a comprehensive thing on upset. It's a big topic. I'm just giving you some basic introductory ideas. There's more, but step 10. You've got step 10 on the wall scrolls where it says we continue to take personal inventory and when we are wrong, promptly admitted it. But then you've got step 10 in the book. And the step 10 on the wall scroll is not a comprehensive summary of everything that's in the step. And when you look at the book, you've got a couple of pages, and step 10 has got a couple of dozen things to do. Step 11 has got a couple of dozen things to do. So they're not adequately covered by the thing. The detail is the real content of the step. Now, when I got into recovery, people didn't use the big book as the set of instructions for the program. They used the 12 and 12, which was very confusing because it's not a set of instructions. It's got some good stuff in it, but you can't really satisfactorily work the steps out of it. It assumes you've done it already and you're just having a fireside chat with Bill to discuss, wasn't that great and interesting, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. But doing one step 10 was understood to be, you sit down at night with a pen and a piece of paper and you do a miniature step 4 with, once I was... I asked Jonathan, my other half, to do something, and he said no, and I looked slightly askance, and he said, "You're going to do a little column on it?" He's never been to a meeting, but he's somehow picked up the lingo, so he knows we do little columns on things. And so what you would do is this, and people would, and this was the standard thing of if you not many people did the steps, but those that did. This over-egging the pudding, this really elaborate thing every night. This affects my... and then, the 14 character defects. I don't know where that came from, but there was this list of the 14. And you had to work out which ones they were. And I can't tell you how many people I've met who do that, and it just makes them really depressed. Because it's the same thing night after night. So you've really got 2 questions under the continuing to take, actually 3 questions under the continuing to take personal inventory, because I think it happens in step 11, I think it happens in step 10, in step 11, and in step 12, and those are 3 different things. So the first aspect of continuing to take personal inventory, actually I'm going to do 12 first, because it's the most important. It says we practice these principles in all our affairs, which means if finance or food or sex or romance blows up as an area where I clearly have unresolved shit, then I can simply work the steps from 1 to 12 on that with a sponsor. It doesn't matter that it's on another topic, because the system is the same. Powerlessness, I need God, turn the area over. Where am I going wrong in my beliefs, thinking and behaviour? Admit it to someone else. Make amends if necessary. Turn it over again in 6 and 7. Perhaps write a sane and sound ideal in accordance with page 69. It's the same thing. So I don't tolerate persistent unhappiness in my life. I do something about it quickly. But most of it is in 10 and 11. And 11 is the daily business. And it says when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. And then it's going to say we avoid drifting into worry, remorse, and morbid reflection, I think. So worry is negative thoughts about the future. Remorse is negative thoughts about the past. Morbid reflection is any negative thoughts not covered by the other two. So it could just say, but don't get into negative thinking. My mind is not my friend. Yours might be your friend's. Mine is not my friend. I live next to worry, remorse, and morbid reflection. My defects have been removed, but they haven't been removed far. They're right next to me. They're in arm's length. God gave us brains to use. Now, contrary to what I thought for a long time, I am very, very small and insignificant, and the universe and God are very big and are very significant. I was told once to go into the corner and count myself. The answer was one. There's just one of me. But there are lots of other people. So I'm to use my mind thinking about how I can constructively act in the universe, not to think about me. And I'm so dangerous to myself, I literally limit myself to thinking about myself for 5 minutes a day. That is it. I can't afford more than that. If I can't find a couple of things to change in steps 10 and 11 in 5 minutes, I'm not in the right space to do any self-examination at all. And what I find in the first 5 minutes is enough to change for a month. I don't need to look further. So when I do the review at night, it doesn't say to write it, so that means I don't write it. Now, what I do write, the corrective measures, I write those down because I'll forget those, because I want to remember those. I don't want to remember the defects. The whole point is to turn it over to God and have them taken from me, not stored up for later. So, were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? It doesn't say, please detail at enormous length the ways in which you are resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid. Analyse these and then retail the results around everyone in your phone book. That ain't step 11. That's fun, but it ain't step 11. It's, I did it again. God, you show me immediately what the corrective measure is for this. So I just look for the big ticket items over the last 24 hours. God showed me the corrective measures. I write down the corrective measures, and then I meditate on those. Meditate just means think about. So I think about those. During the day, I've got to be military with myself. We continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, which really is the full range of bad attitude, bad behaviour. That's it. Do I have a bad attitude? Do I have a bad behaviour? And it's not a question of analysis. It's a question of getting rid of it. And I get rid of it by not doing something with it. Whatever I concentrate on gets bigger and expands and grows. These things get killed by having the oxygen supply cut off. And I do that by pointing my attention to something constructive I can get on with. There are a couple of questions here. So, do some people, some things, soccer stars, pilots? Soccer stars need an ego, and is it dangerous to, I think that is something like get rid of it completely. There's an image that runs all the way through the book about us being actors. And it's the key to the whole thing. And in step 3, it then says, hereinafter in this drama of life. So when you've got a theatre, you've got a play going on the stage, and then you've got the actors who are playing the roles. Now, if you've got an actor in Macbeth, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone that's not seen it and is planning a little outing over the next weeks or months, there's a lot of blood on the floor. I mean, it starts with blood on the floor and it ends with more blood on the floor. So if you're one of the characters in Macbeth, good luck to you. Not many people get out of that one unscathed. And the material world is a bit like that. A doctor once said to me, no one has a good end. So buckle up. And not wrong. The material world is pretty dangerous and lots of difficult things can happen. If I think the material realm is all there is and all I am is a physical body running around the material realm, you'd have to be psychotic not to be frightened. The answer, you can have an actor playing the role in Macbeth superbly. He can be playing Macduff and sticky end. But the actor's fine because he knows that's not who he really is. It's simply the role he's playing. And his job is to play the role well for the people who are watching the play. He's not playing the role for the other characters or for the character itself. What is the ego? I get to have a gazillion roles in my life, and those change over time. The ego is my belief that I am those roles. So people who have a public persona, I mean, everyone's got a persona. Everyone's got a set of roles and a set of images in their own mind of what that role is and images in other people's minds. You just got those, like little avatars sitting above your head. My problem is when I identify with that so much, and Mark Houston was very good on this. He says, if you, let's say you're a husband, and you think you are the husband, rather than the husband being a role that you're playing, then if your wife says, we want to get divorced, the husband is literally going to be no more. Once the divorce papers come through, no husband. And so you're fighting for your life if you're identified with that character. If someone thinks he is Macduff and he sees someone coming at him with a knife, he is mortally terrified. If he's the actor and rep and he knows he's going to be in The Importance of Being Earnest next week, he doesn't care that Macduff is going to die. If I know, which I do, that my spirit will outlive my physical form, well, there might be some sticky moments, but basically it's going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. It's going to be fine. And then it's the detachment from those roles that matters. I've got a couple of questions and then we'll wrap up. How many times should one approach someone they owe an amends to when they are one of the biggest on the list? I'm reading between the lines here. You go to someone, you say, can I make amends? And they say, they tell you to get lost. My approach is, if they won't see me, what the book says, send them an honest letter. So I send them an honest letter, and then that's the end of it. And then I'm open. In some of these rooms in this hotel, and don't try this out or there'll be shenanigans, but they have communicating doors between some of the rooms. Now, to pass between the two rooms, the doors on both sides need to be open. So with the amends, it's like you open your side and you wait for them to open theirs, and the responsibility then passes to them. Some people want to be aggrieved, and that's their prerogative. Good luck to them. I'm not there to fix that. And my 14-year-old, this is a question, my 14-year-old is in active substance abuse. My heart is broken watching this. I'm not surprised. I try my best to hand my fears to God. I know I'm powerless, but still left in constant upset. How do I stop being upset about my child? I'm going to expand that to the more general question about loving people who are in the most terrible, terrible trouble. The first thing, as my friend Tom says, is 100,000 Al-Anon meetings will take the edge off. One's got to get in, if one has people who are active in addiction. Some people are just born with natural defense mechanisms against entanglement. Most people aren't, and they need help. I would draw a distinction between pain and suffering. So what is upset? Upset is emotional turmoil. It's the state of not accepting what is going on and being churned up. And the curious thing is, my best friend in recovery took a wrong turn, quite a significant wrong turn, and ended up dying of drink and drugs after many, many years of sobriety. And the last couple of years were not pretty. And in particular in the last few months, and then when he finally died, the curious thing is, one is in extraordinary pain, unspeakable. But I prepared sufficiently in advance, in time for it, that I wasn't churned up. I knew it was coming. Suffering is when I'm stuck in all of the narratives on top of the pain to avoid the actual pain itself. Pain is tolerable, and it's part of the whole range of emotions which come with loving people and being on the planet in the first place. You're going to have the full range. Just like when you watch a film, you go through the full range. But one mustn't become lost in it. It's the getting lost in it and the resisting of it which is the real killer. There is a story I won't do justice, and I'll finish on this, and it's someone else's, and you can probably find it on YouTube. And before that, there's one tiny thing. I said to Maureen many years ago, I'm scared my mother is going to commit suicide. And Maureen, I thought, was going to comfort me, and she said, she may well do. But she'll end up somewhere else, and you'll find a way through it. But I'm not going to tell you she's going to be okay. She might not be. People are not necessarily... Sometimes people are okay. In fact, most of the time people are, but sometimes they really aren't. There's a rabbi called Manis Friedman who got into a conversation with a woman whose 18-year-old son was killed in a motorcycle accident. And she said, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm so angry at God for allowing this to happen. And the rabbi, talking to her, said, and he says himself of it, I don't know where this came from, but he said to her, imagine God's plan was this, that God was going to send down a spirit to the earth for 18 years for you to look after, and he chose you of all people to look after this person for 18 years. Do you want him to go back on that? Would you want him to have gone back on that and not given you the opportunity for 18 years? And that turned the corner. Didn't solve it, but it turned the corner. Whenever I go to one of those, that's an unsolvable question here. When I've got an apparently unsolvable question, I go to God, and then I keep my eyes open and my ears open, and I read and I listen. And over the weeks and months, things get shown to me that I couldn't have gone out and found on purpose, but I am receiving, in Star Trek they say hailing on all frequencies. I'm receiving from God on all frequencies, and God will get the stories to me that I need to hear to build a structure that I can withstand whatever is going to happen. Thanks for listening.